We all think we know the story of how farming got started, but what if that simple tale, the one about a single light bulb moment, is just completely wrong? Today, we are digging into the real story of agriculture. And trust me, it's a global mystery, full of unexpected clues and some pretty brilliant ancient detectives. So let's get into it.
So, here's the classic story, right? One brilliant group of people, somewhere, figures out how to plant seeds. And then that revolutionary idea just slowly spreads across the entire planet. But is that really what happened? Exactly. That's the story of the agricultural revolution. And notice, I said singular. It paints this really clean, simple picture of a single light bulb going off. An idea born in just one place that changed everything for humanity.
Yeah? Well, that simple story? It's wrong. The truth is way more exciting. It's like a global detective case with clues scattered across continents, hidden deep in the soil, and sometimes even stuck to ancient tools. And today, we're going to follow those clues and solve this thing.
Okay, so every good detective needs a toolkit. And for archaeologists, the big challenge is figuring out an ancient menu. I mean, how do you really know what someone ate 10,000 years ago? Well, the answer lies in the clues the plants themselves left behind.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because not all clues are created equal. You've got grains, like rice or wheat. Think of those as a breadcrumb trail. They leave behind a lot of durable, obvious evidence. And then you've got tubers, like potatoes. These guys are the ninja clues. They're stealthy, super hard to find, and they can disappear without a trace.
So let's start with those breadcrumbs. Grains are tough. Seriously, they can survive for thousands of years as little charred kernels after a fire. They also produce these incredible microscopic silica skeletons, they're called phytoliths, that last in the soil for ages. Grains are, let's just say, not very shy about leaving evidence.
But the ninjas, the tubers, they're a totally different story. A potato is mostly just water and starch, so it rots away to nothing really fast. They don't char like seeds, and their traces are almost always indirect and totally microscopic. So how do you catch a ninja? Well, you have to look for what it leaves on its equipment.
And that brings us to our very first case file, the Andean potato. This is the ultimate ninja clue. So how in the world did archaeologists prove that people were farming potatoes thousands of years ago in Peru when all the evidence just disappears?
They used some absolutely incredible micro-detective work. The method itself is just brilliant. First, you find an ancient stone tool, one that was used for grinding up food. Then you carefully take a sample of the gunk stuck in its cracks and put it under a microscope. And then, boom! You can actually identify the distinct shape of potato starch grains. It's amazing.
I love how the source material sums it up. It says the potato might not have left a nice receipt, but it left microscopic crumbs all over the kitchen equipment. And that right there, that's the key piece of evidence.
And if that wasn't cool enough, scientists found a bonus clue. Get this, they've discovered these same potato starch grains trapped in the dental calculus, that's the hardened plaque, on ancient human teeth. I mean, you can't get more direct evidence of someone's diet than finding it still stuck to their teeth thousands of years later.
Okay, so we've seen how to track down the most elusive clues. But what about when the evidence isn't really hiding? Let's follow the breadcrumbs with our next case file, looking at squash in Mesoamerica and rice in Southeast Asia, crops that left a much, much clearer trail.
So in a cave in Oaxaca, Mexico, archaeologists found perfectly preserved squash seeds and rinds, and by studying their shape and size, they could prove that humans weren't just gathering them. They were actively domesticating them, literally changing the plant's biology as far back as 10,000 years ago.
But why squash? And why so early? Well, it's because it was basically the ultimate multi-tool plant. The seeds were packed with nutrition, and the hard rinds could be dried and used as super durable containers or even as tools. It was just incredibly useful long before anyone really cared about eating the fleshy part. Now, over in Asia, the rice story hinges on those phytoliths we mentioned earlier, the plant's little silica skeleton. These durable microfossils act like fingerprints, telling archaeologists exactly where and when rice was grown, even if no actual grains of rice survived. In this phytolith evidence, it reveals a totally different kind of story. In places like Thailand, it suggests that rice farming wasn't invented there from scratch. Instead, the whole practice spread from the Yangtze region of China and was then adapted by local communities. So this wasn't invention, it was innovation through sharing and adoption.
But hold on, our detective story has one more big twist. Because sometimes the real innovation wasn't the plan itself, it was the plan. In places like Egypt's Nile Valley, the genius was in how ancient farmers learned to partner with the planet's natural rhythms.
They practiced something called flood recession agriculture. Now that's a fancy term, but it basically means they weren't building massive irrigation canals, not at first anyway. They were just letting the river do all the heavy lifting for them.
Just look at this cycle. It's so elegant. Every single year, the Nile would flood, and it would blanket the entire valley with a fresh layer of nutrient-rich silt. Then, the water would recede, leaving behind these perfectly tilled, perfectly fertilized, and perfectly watered fields. All the farmers had to do was walk out and plant their seeds. It was an incredibly brilliant and sustainable system. So after looking at all the case files, the ninja tubers, the breadcrumb grains, and these brilliant systems, I think it's time for the verdict. What does all this evidence really tell us about the dawn of farming?
Well, the big takeaway is this. Agriculture wasn't one thing. It was many, many things. In the Andes, people mastered potatoes. In Mesoamerica, it was squash. In Southeast Asia, rice farming was adopted and then adapted. And along the Nile, the innovation was the system itself. You have different people facing different problems, all arriving at the same revolutionary solution, farming.
So the verdict is in. There was no single agricultural revolution. What we see instead is a global story of parallel innovation. It was like a dozen different revolutions, all sparked by human ingenuity, happening all over the world, completely independently of each other.
And that leaves us with a final thought, a really big one. If people all over the planet, with no contact with one another, could independently solve one of humanity's biggest challenges thousands of years ago, it really makes you wonder, what else are we capable of today?